Hello everyone, my name is Marija. I am an embodied processing somatic practitioner. I am a neurographica specialist. I online go by name Self-Talk Body Soul. So if you want to find me on my Instagram or YouTube, or look up my website, search for Self-Talk Body Soul. This video I wanted to record because I'm talking backwards. I wanted to record this video to talk a little bit about my journey of certain health conditions and the link between those conditions, and partially not from an expert standpoint, but from a personal lived experience standpoint, and how it relates to the work that I do with somatic practices and trauma resolution and nervous system regulation, etc. I don't particularly have a structure for this video, but I just knew that or rather I think that this will help a lot of people who might find themselves in similar situations with their health and their circumstances. So I think I'll just give a little kind of background as to the story of my life and how things kind of occurred, and then I want to kind of within that intertwine what I have understood in the process of healing both physical and mental diseases, and how they relate to each other, as I said, and just my process with all of it, really. So I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease in 2010, I believe. By that point, it was quite a kind of a more of a severe stage. So I was put on a lot of medication, on steroids and immunosuppressants. I think I was like on 20 pills a day, because I had to take certain medications and then they would create side effects that I'd need to take medications for those, and it's that whole shenanigan. For those who don't know, so Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis are both irritable bowel disorders. Essentially, the lining of the intestine, usually it occurs in the intestine, either in large or small intestine. The lining itself gets inflamed and you can have ulcers if you've got ulcerative colitis as well. And it's very painful, and it disrupts a lot of the body and the system. So my journey with it has been that I have been struggling with abdominal pain for most of my life. I've been kind of complaining about belly aches for years to my mom and my family, and doctors just didn't know what was wrong. I lived in Latvia until I was 15, and Crohn's disease is not a common condition anyway, but especially in Latvia. We've never heard of that condition before, and it took years and different scans and different doctors and different misdiagnoses to finally get to a conclusion that what I have is Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. I was misdiagnosed with pet allergies and with anemia and with gluten intolerance. What do you call that? Not intolerance, but the actual celiac disease. I was put on a celiac diet, which made me lose even more weight, and I was already like borderline anorexic. That didn't help my condition either. Why have I gone blurry? There you go. A bit better. So at the time of getting diagnosed, I had an amazing doctor in Latvia. She was very caring, and she gave a lot of, not just kind of pills, but she gave lifestyle change advice, and it's been quite good. The recovery process, there was a lot of support that I didn't know was possible to have. So that's kind of the background of the actual disease, and how that was sort of how they found out that that's what I have. Now, when it comes to the cause of that condition, if you look online, the so-called experts have no idea what it is. They have no idea what causes it. They, as usual as it happens, when experts don't know something, they just say, oh, it's genetic or it's environmental, or something along those lines. And this is kind of where I want to start in talking about the kind of work that I do. So, as I said, I'm a somatic practitioner, and in the training that I have done, we essentially, the therapy that I do for people is not really therapy, it's a lifestyle. It's a way of looking at life through a whole different lens. We're taught and conditioned in our lives to see the world through the lens of, through the filter of the ego, and through the filter of kind of straight up facts and science, and when I say facts, I mean like things that you can kind of scientifically prove. What we do with somatic work is we really focus on the body and the wisdom of the body, and we re-establish the connection between the body and the mind. When we talk about the whole mind-body connection, the bridging mind and the body and the spirit, and all that sort of stuff. If you're into yogic practices, they're very much concerned with the unity of the mind and body and spirit. And I was into a lot of that for years. And I was into yoga for years, and I am still. I love yoga, but it's still, in our world, we still perceive all of that through the mental filter. We think about these ideas of kind of how do I bridge the mind and the body, where from the somatic standpoint, what we're doing is we're not thinking about it, we're experiencing it. And the more I've been coming back to that framework, when I say coming back, it's really, I don't think of consciously, I've never really lived through that filter, but I think we're born with an innate ability to be in our body, but it gets, I don't want to say taken away from us, but in some regard it does get taken away from us, and in other ways it just we get conditioned out of it for multiple reasons, and also in other ways we condition ourselves out of it. When I delved more into how my subconscious works and what the subconscious really is, and how the nervous system works, I quickly confirmed the belief that I held for a while, that a lot of that my physical condition with Crohn's is not a physical condition. It is a condition of the mind that could not process certain things. And those things that I couldn't process in my mind had to go somewhere. And so they went into my body. That is one way you can look at it anyway. And this is a lot what we kind of talk about in somatic work, that your body knows what is happening. And your body will take care of you in every single way it can, even if you can say that the care is detrimental to you. The body recognizes that that detriment is still better than the other potential outcomes. So now, kind of to explain this better in an example way, I want to talk about my life at the time of getting diagnosed and before that. I was born in Latvia, in the post-Soviet country. Life was very difficult, and at the age of 12 days old, my father died, and my mom and my sister, who was 6 years old at the time, moved back to live with my mom's mom. And this is whom I consider my immediate family. I've always lived with them, my sister, my mom, and my grandmother. The difficulty of life, the difficulty of the circumstances, and being forced into the situation that no party wanted to be in has created a lot of stress and rupture in our family dynamic. My mom had to work a lot to provide for everyone, and my grandmother essentially became a mother, whilst my mother became a father. And there was a lot of trauma, not just from the death of my father, but from many other things that have happened whilst I was alive, before I was alive, even before my mother was alive. My family carries a lot of generational trauma from war, because of where I am from, and because of poverty, and many other things that occurred as a result of war. Fatherlessness, alcoholism, poverty, in the case of my grandmother, hunger, men coming back from war shell-shocked. There was a lot of bad things happening. Of course, the concept of trauma, the concept of PTSD as trauma has only occurred since the war times. I believe since World War I. So it is a very new understanding. And only in recent decades we have understood that trauma is much more than just, being shell-shocked from war, or getting into a car accident, or even experiencing sexual assault. Trauma is much more pervasive, and it's much more broad than we have always believed. And so because of that, there was no resources or understanding or conversation around how to deal with any of it. And so people just lived their life trying to survive and cope. And of course, where my work comes in is it starts to look at how the body was coping with all of these things at the time. My grandmother had in her, I don't think she was young, but a couple of decades ago, I think, she had ulcerative colitis. So the idea of it being a genetic disease kind of fit, because my grandmother had ulcerative colitis, I have ulcerative colitis, and I have Crohn's, kind of fits. But what I am more concerned with is, or interested in, is to understand that it wasn't the physical condition that was passed on. It was the mental conditions that were passed on. And I don't mean it in a sense of mental health diseases got passed on to me. I mean sensitivities got passed on to me. Their limiting beliefs, or the beliefs about life, have got passed on to me. Their view of people got passed on to me. Their stress got passed on to me, both in the mental and physical realm. The concept of something being genetic, I believe it comes in where we can say that I have like every single human being, we all, because we're so individual and unique, we have our weak links in the body, in the mind. And under stress and survival lifestyles where we live in the sympathetic states of the nervous systems all the time, these weak links will break. So you can say that for me, the weak links have been the digestive tract and my nervous system. For other people, their weak links could be skin, the skin barrier, or maybe their heart, or their lungs, or their bones, or something else entirely. And that will be like the prevalent thing that happens to them. But it has been proven that genes, genetic codes, and I believe this is from Joe Dispenza, who studies epigenetics, that the genetic material can only be triggered with external triggers, basically. So if you have a genetic material of, let's say, like diabetes or whatever, I don't actually know if there is a gene for diabetes, so I'm only giving this as like a hypothetical example. But let's say there is a gene of diabetes and it gets passed on to the next person. If that person has a very different life to the people before them that had diabetes, they will not have diabetes. So for me, even though my grandmother had, also, by the way, I believe that was Gabor Mate who said that genetic conditions only get passed on. Like if we're thinking of like pure genetic conditions, they only become genetic, not passed on, but they become genetic, I think, after 7 generations. As far as I'm concerned, my grandmother's mother, well, I mean, I can't know that, right? We can't know that, but there wasn't a known case of anyone before my grandmother having digestive problems like that. But if we take that aside, even though my grandmother had colitis, and so maybe I have that genetic predisposition for it, it didn't have to erupt. Something had to happen in my life for it to come forward. And that something is, in basic terms, stress. The stress of the trauma that my body was born with from my mother and her life, and from my grandmother and her life, and the stress that I was brought up with. Now, calling it stress is, it's kind of putting it's like an umbrella term, if you like, for all the stress that I have experienced in my life. And I can then kind of go in and break it down a bit further. So the kind of stresses I had, as I said, like there's a lot of generational trauma that occurred, which then translated into my grandmother's and mother's behavior, because that's what happens when you don't when you don't heal your trauma. It will come up on the conscious level in very nasty ways, in behavior or in disease. And so there was a lot of anxiety in the house. There was a lot of shouting in the house, occasional fighting, stress about money, bullying. My first bullies were my family, unfortunately. And emotional suppression. There was a lot of that on top of kind of real struggles with, finances or and health, as well as mental health problems. As I said, there was a lot of anxiety in the house, predominantly coming from my grandmother. She has always had chronic, debilitating anxiety. I don't think she knows that that's what she has, but you can see it without being an expert if you spend some time with her, on top of potentially other conditions. And without going into details about like the rest of my family, there was just a lot going on, and that is how I developed a lot of the complex PTSD, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, or complex trauma, in other words, from a lot of that everyday stress. I like to kind of describe it as, I don't remember who said that, maybe it was in my training, but I liken it to 1,000 paper cuts. If you have, or kind of, 1 degree, is it first degree burns that are like the mildest ones? It's like if you have like one paper cut, or like one, like you burn your like finger on a grill or something, it's gonna hurt, but like, and it's gonna be uncomfortable for maybe a day or two, but like you're not gonna die from that, obviously. But if that happens every day, and you've got thousands of paper cuts or thousands of 1 degree burns everywhere over your body, that's going to be agony. And that in itself will create trauma as well. And this is how I lived my life, being completely unequipped with how to deal with all of that stress, all of that emotional baggage. And one way that it manifested is in a huge suppression, or huge reaction of suppression of my anger. There are certain families that kind of suppress anger as a family, in the sense that they want to be seen as this like calm family. They just don't have any conflict. They don't bring anything up in the house. There's no resolution of anything. Everything just gets stuffed down. And then there is other families, which was my case, where there's just constant eruption of everything. So there was a lot of anger in my family. But at the same time, there was also suppression of anger. It was really weird, very weird. But it's I think there was a kind of a hierarchy, and because I was the youngest, I was humiliated and bullied and laughed at, and told I'm essentially not allowed to be angry or to express myself, in a way that was kind of saying, you can't do that to me, or you need to stop doing that. Like, that was kind of a bit laughable. I felt like I was rejected if I did that, and that is how the pattern of me suppressing my anger has started. On top of observing the adults in the family being angry all the time, it was so stressful, and it made me so sad and powerless and scared, that I think there was also, on top of that, the outside suppression, there was also this internal suppression, because I didn't know how to manage the energy of anger, neither internally nor externally. Now, things have kind of started to make sense for me in the recent years, when I delved into the whole concept of mind-body connection, because I realized that there's a lot of information about how inflammation is caused by suppressed or repressed anger. And if you look into kind of Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine, and what is it called? There's a specific, have I got it somewhere here? No, there's a specific kind of Chinese or Eastern framework, and they look at like the different elements. Oh, Usin, is it called Usin, something like that, I think. Like they look at the different elements. They're like earth, fire, metal, etc., and the colors, and how everything connects inside the body, and the organ systems and emotions, and all of that. And it started to make a lot of sense. And then it got like seriously confirmed by the embodied processing work that I do, that all of that suppressed anger lived in my intestines. What is also interesting that I really find fascinating is that this is how I kind of like to look at all that sort of Louise Hay stuff and other practitioners that look at the correlation between the different organs and the body parts and the diseases and the emotional aspects. The way, I can't say that I'm all for, looking at all these different charts and just kind of seeing like, oh, well, I've got like a problem with my spleen. That means I don't know, I have a problem with my sadness or whatever. I don't really like that. My framework comes from, first of all, going directly into your body and communicating with your body through your subconscious, which is actually a lot easier. It's done a lot. It is accessed in a much easier way than I think most people realize. And this is what I do in EP, embodied processing. So either you do that, or the other way you can look at it, and this is the way I've also recognized where my issues were, is to understand the function of the organ in the body and where the placement of that organ is, what follows it, what precedes it, and especially within the organs in the torso, it's really, really fascinating when you start to look at kind of what does what job. And then when you understand that, you can start to relate it to the emotional and kind of life as a whole, the emotional aspect in life as a whole. And one way in which you can view the whole of the digestive system, especially the intestines, if you have digestive problems, this is like another little framework that kind of comes into this, is to understand that if you can't digest something, what does it mean? I can't digest it. Like when otherwise will you say something like that? I can't digest it. When something happens in your life that is too much, that is unfamiliar, that just doesn't fit with your system, I can't digest it. I can't stomach it, right? We say normally, I can't stomach that. Or that makes me feel sick. We have a lot of phraseology around our body that it's like so automatic. We say it, but we don't even recognize the effect it has on our body. I know Marissa Peer, she really often refers back to that. She works with, she's a hypnotherapist, and she works, I think, with some kind of NLP stuff, neurolinguistic programming. And she says it all the time, people come to her for sessions to do with their mental health and life. And they say things like, oh, this gives me such a fucking headache. Oh, this makes me feel sick. I can't stomach it. I'd rather die than deal with this. And when she kind of reflected back to them and they realized that they physically have issues that they talk about when they reference, their problems in life. And I was watching myself a lot, kind of observing my own words and my beliefs. And I realized I do the same. I say, I'm so sick of this so much. It's crazy. And we literally program ourselves into sickness. But also you can look at it the other way. So yes, we can program ourselves into sickness by repeating the same words and the same belief over and over and over again. Like if you think this is still woo-woo, like please do more research, because like this is such a well-known information by now. So we can program ourselves into sickness, but the way you can also look at it is that if there is a certain pattern of speaking that we are accustomed to. Like, for example, for me, I would always say, like, this makes me feel sick. Like, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this. You can also take it as a message from your subconscious into your conscious mind, right? Why am I picking those words specifically? Why don't I say, oh, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to deal with this. I'm tired of this. Or any other way I could say it. I am picking the word sick. Is there a subconscious messaging in that? Is there something that I might need to look at in the body that is sending the signal to me? Like, maybe I'm physically feeling sick. Maybe there's something wrong with my stomach. Maybe my stomach is trying to communicate something to me. So it works both ways. That's when we talk about mind-body connection. What people don't know a lot of the time is that we've got something called the vagus nerve, which is what polyvagal theory is based on. And that is what we work with when we work with trauma. Vagus nerve travels all around your abdomen. I believe it goes further, like, into your legs as well, and it connects to your it's one of the cranial nerves, I believe, or it connects to your cranial nerve. So it connects to your brain. I believe about, if I'm not wrong, at least 70% of information that travels via the vagus nerve travels upwards into the brain. And only 10 to 30% of it travels down from the brain into the body. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of the things that we do, our behavior, our emotions, our thoughts, are actually caused by whatever is happening in the body. And that is why so many people, like, struggle with affirmations and, manifestation and all these things, because they are trying to send the signals down from their brain to their body, kind of trying to program it. And you absolutely can do it. But if your nervous system is out of whack, it doesn't matter how many times you're going to tell yourself, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, I'm this, because it's not going to happen, because your nervous system is out of whack. When I started to realize that a lot of my intestinal problems have got to do with my repressed anger. I mean, it was kind of, my history and relationship with anger is very complex, and I am definitely not at the bottom of figuring it out. Absolutely not. Like, full transparency here. Like, I haven't figured it out yet. But what I know for sure is that link is there. And the amount of experiences I've had with anger, whether in session space or outside of sessions, has proven that to me yet again and again. And what I have seen is that the more I process that repressed anger, the more I face it, the more I allow it to be in my body in a contained way, yes, some of my symptoms are still there, but overall, if I look at my life and where I was even a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and beyond that, it's just night and day, absolute night and day. And when I go back into my old patterns and I start repressing my anger again, my symptoms get worse, my body gets louder. And I know that this is an experience of many people with especially mental health conditions. I don't really see many people talk about that in the physical health space, but the body will start to talk to you in either physical pain, discomfort, or emotional pain and discomfort, because that's how the body communicates. It doesn't communicate to you in straight up thoughts. It communicates through imagery, it communicates through emotion, it communicates through sensation, it communicates through metaphors, and that is how it's trying to get to you. I've gone through different phases with my anger. To start with, I was raised, I would say, up until I was about 16, probably. I was a very timid person. I was a grey mouse. That's how I described myself, at least in the sense of anger. And I kept just storing it. Maybe just as a kind of a side note as well, just for completion's sake, if you like, kind of talk about like the rest of my life in terms of the symptoms that I have been experiencing throughout my life. I pretty much have a lifelong insomnia with periods of it being good. And they can be years as well, those periods. But from when I was a baby until I was about 15, I had nightmares. And I know that there's a lot of, still to this day, there's a lot of repressed, suppressed, unprocessed fear stuck in my body that manifested itself as anxiety. And my dreams were trying to help me all my life process that stored fear, like, terror, existential terror. So, yeah, up until about 15, I didn't sleep very well. I either had nightmares or I only went to sleep at past 3 in the morning, and then I'd have to get up for school in the early morning, and then the next night I might have nightmares again, and it was like that most of my childhood. And then when we moved to the UK, it got better, and from around the age of 16. So in terms of the sleep, it's been okay until about a year and a half ago, and now I'm in the phase of feeling it's resurfaced, the insomnia stuff, and it's probably a lot to do with the fact that I've been doing very deep somatic work. So it sort of like came back up to be like, hello, you haven't dealt with me. So that's been a really long journey. And then on top of that, I had periodically depression in my life. I think I had depression as a child, but I can't really, it's kind of like, it's quite blurry, as a memory. So the first time I kind of knew I had depression, when I was diagnosed with it, I was 19. But at around 16, that's kind of when my anger started to resurface. I became, and you could say like, oh, I was just like a teenager, if you like, but it was a lot of rage. My relationship with my mom was really ruptured because of it. Not because of my rage solely, but it's definitely played a part. Because obviously there was a reason my rage was coming out, right? So that's kind of when it started to come out, and then it sort of settled again, more or less, when I was at university. And then I remember distinctly when I moved to 2020, I moved to Scotland, and I remember that's when I was like consciously aware of my rage coming up. Like it was, you could call it almost like anger issues, in a sense that like anything would just trigger the fuck out of me, and my anger would resurface so strongly. And I liked it. I remember distinctly like this time, because I was like, whoa, I've never felt this before. This feels really good. I was stuck in the cage all my life, and now I feel like I'm just ripping the bars of the cage apart, That's how it felt. And it felt really good. But then I started to have problems after about a year or so of living like that, just like, rah. I started to have problems because I started to break things, and they were expensive. I never hit anyone. I was able to, still have enough self-control to not injure anyone. But I would break things, and my behavior started to have a damaging emotional effect on people around me. So I was like, okay, I don't know what to do about this, because the other side effect, not side effect, but the symptom that I had, especially when I was first diagnosed with depression, was self-harm. And what I knew is that if I'm going to now go back and suppress my anger, I'm going to harm myself again. And I'm going to feel really awful. But if I don't suppress my anger, it feels like it just flows out of me like a volcanic lava, and I have no idea what to do with it. And I was like, where do I find the middle ground? Like, this is insane. I don't know what to do with this. I feel stuck. That's kind of at that point, that's when I discovered somatic work. And it's been life-changing for me, in a sense that, as I said before, I definitely don't have it all figured out yet. For sure not. But what it has helped me with is being able to sit with and contain the experience of anger. So it's very different to suppressing it, and it's very different to exploding. It happens, and this is why I said, like, I'm still working on it, because I think I could still gain more skills and awareness in being able to hold it entirely in the safest way I can. I think I'm still meeting my edge with it, because it's a lifelong thing. It's been in multiple different ways. It's been a part of my identity structure, a part of my story of my life. It's one of those things that is very complex for me. Like, there's certain other things that I've worked through pretty quickly, and I can sit with a lot of different emotions pretty easily. But when it comes to that rage, it's painful. And so, as much as I know there's still so many more tools I could learn, and so much more capacity I could gain to hold it better, the effect has been unimaginable on my life. So, as an example, I can say that, my mom has always been a really big trigger for me, and as well as my grandmother. And what I have noticed is there were a few times in the recent sort of past, in the past year or so, when they would say something super, super triggering, or do something that would really upset me. And it would still bring up so much of that rage and that sadness. But what was fascinating is just how quickly I would move out of it. And this is where it kind of, as a side note, I just want to mention it to people, that when you go through healing of anything, most of the time, obviously it depends on what it is, but it's, emotionally speaking, it's not that you're going to stop feeling emotions, or that a specific emotion will just not appear anymore. That's not healthy, and that's not how it's supposed to work. The way it works, however, is that over time you develop enough capacity to hold your emotions safely, which then trains your nervous system to realize that your experience is safe. And what that does is it then allows the nervous system, when it goes into upregulated state or super downregulated state, the time it takes for it to come back to equilibrium shortens. If before, just as a comparison, even a couple of years ago, when I had huge ruptures with my mom, it would take me literal days to recover. Like, I would be shaken from those experiences. My anxiety would be heightened, my heart rate would be heightened, I'd be literally physically shaking, I'd be ruminating over it, I'd be so stressed out for days. And now, like an hour at most, even from the same sort of intensity level of dysregulation or rupture, an hour, and I'm fine. And what's ridiculous and amazing is that I have to put a lot less effort now into putting myself back into regulation than I used to. And it's a huge win-win for me, and I know it's a testament to how much work I've done, but it's also so much about the people that have held me through this process, and it's a testament to how strong and resilient and flexible my body and my nervous system are. There has been certain things, as I said, with for example, with the insomnia, and of course the anger is still there, the rage. So there's been certain things that I'm still processing those, because they're like really huge pillars, if you like. When you start doing this work, you start working through what we call the lowest hanging branches. So things that are like readily accessible, like your nervous system and your subconscious are ready to work on those, and you start to peel away at those layers. And I've peeled away at so many of those layers. It's crazy. It's been over 2 years that I've been doing this specific type of work. And but these two, like that, the anxiety that now is recreated my insomnia and the rage. They're like the pillars of my healing journey. And oftentimes I obviously, like every normal person, wish that that wasn't the case and that I didn't have those problems. But that's the cards I was dealt with. And so I'm continuing to work away at those and continue to learn to contain these experiences and act in accordance with my emotions. Not react to my emotions, is very different, but respond to my emotions. In terms of my physical health, it's also been a journey. Generally speaking, I feel well. There was kind of like a little health or quite a big health scare recently, but since then I felt much better. But as soon as it happened, I kind of knew, emotionally, I knew what was happening. I know I've given like a lot of backstory here, but this is kind of what I think, maybe I know we've been talking for like 50 minutes. So maybe I'll just spend 10 more minutes just to talk about this really crucial part of all of this and how it all connects. So when we look at autoimmune conditions, which Crohn's disease is, this is really fascinating. Okay, again, not an expert, but I've done some research on this topic. And again, through my own lived experience, this is what I have understood. 70 to 90% of your immune cells live in your digestive tract, in your intestines. So already when we talk about autoimmunity, it doesn't matter whether it's rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's disease or anything else, we have to look at intestines, like what's happening in your gut. And specifically with Crohn's, it's even more obvious, right? Because it's in the gut, the disease itself. The reason I kind of do this, by the way, like when I talk about disease or illness, is because I don't subscribe to the whole concept of disease. Maybe a topic for another video, but just for the sake of simplicity and ease of communication, I call it a disease. This specific condition, and I haven't looked up about the rest of them, but with Crohn's and IBD and these other conditions, autoimmune diseases, they have started to peak after about at around 1980s or 70s. And the correlation there is with the increase, like surge of industrialization of farming, specifically intensive farming. There's this really interesting interview that I might just link rather than talk about it now. But basically, there's been this discovery has been made that in most of the soil that we have now on the planet, we're lacking a specific component. Now, what is it called? Humic acid, I believe, or something like that, which what it does is it helps to bind the cells, the lining in our intestines. What has become apparent to me, and this is like I'm crossing here the boundary, like the body and the mind, body-mind boundaries, and relating it back to anger. What seems to be happening is that with these autoimmune conditions and digestive problems, what seems to be happening is that you can say the cause of a lot of these issues has been that the lining of our intestines has become ruptured. And this actually makes so much sense when we look at all these different other aspects. So, for example, gluten intolerance, or even the IBS, we call it leaky gut, right? What's happening is there is literal ruptures in the lining of the intestines. So your poop, food, bacteria, mucus, all of that stuff gets into your bloodstream. From what I understand is that is the cause for a lot of the problems. On top of that, the bacteria in our intestine, it has to live somewhere, right? It has to live on the lining. But if we have gaps in the ruptures, there's much smaller surface areas where that healthy bacteria can live. and the immune cells, where the immune cells can live. So when we create that rupture through the terrible food that we eat, through the lack of, not just the terrible food that we eat, like even if you eat not terrible food, if you're not eating food from a healthy soil, organic soil, then you are not getting the right nutrients for your gut to have strong lining. And so not only do things start leaking into your out of your intestines into where there shouldn't be, but on top of that, the bacteria that's supposed to live on the intestine has no room to live on, right? It's kind of like you can say like polar bears trying to survive on melting ice. Like there's not much surface area for them to live on, which is why you might be doing all the supplements, you might be eating all the great food, and you might be, cleansing your intestines and doing whatever else. None of it will stick because there's quite literally nothing to stick to. Everything will leak through the lining. And this has been my experience. This has been really life-changing for me to realize that, not just for the physical kind of perspective reasons, but also coming back to that mind-body connection. If we're thinking about the function of it, right? The lining, the boundary has become leaky. The boundary got ruptured. What does that tell us? Like if in our subconscious level, because the body is the subconscious, you have to understand that as well. It's the physical, but it's also the subconscious. If in the subconscious realm we have leaky boundaries, we have ruptures in our boundaries, and things can just get in and out, things that shouldn't be going in and shouldn't be going out, and our protective systems, the immunity, can't function properly as a result of that, or maybe other way around, our immunity didn't function properly and hence we got the rupture. What does all of that tell us? Well, to me, and this is the conclusion I made for myself, I'm not telling that that's the case for everyone, but in case it helps you to relate that to your experience, to me it made perfect fucking sense in terms of anger. Because anger is our immunity. Anger, the function of anger, so when we talk about the function of intestines, let's also talk about the function of emotions. The function of anger is to protect. The function of anger is to understand something is off in my environment. Something is breaking into my boundaries. And when we feel like we can't protect ourselves, when we feel like we are not allowed to protect ourselves, when we feel like protecting ourselves in any capacity is frowned upon, dismissed, laughed at, or worse, we can get in danger if we try to protect ourselves, which often happens in cases of abuse, physical, sexual, especially, but also mental. We have to keep our anger in, and we have to let in what shouldn't be coming in. So a lot of my healing journey has been about coming to terms with that in the first place, but also it's been a really long journey of learning how to protect my boundaries, which is very different from building walls. But to understand, first of all, where my boundaries are, where do I end and the next person begins? All of that got so blurred as a result of childhood of bullying, essentially, and dysregulation and feeling unsafe, which then results into depression, borderline personality disorder. I'm not going to mention the rest. When you have no idea where your boundaries even are, it becomes a very blurry experience. And on top of that, it becomes really scary to say, no, that's not allowed, because you have no idea, is it allowed? Is it not allowed? I'm not sure. And that's where your healthy anger comes in. Healthy anger is the role of the immune function, where it's supposed to say, No, you can keep that out. Thank you very much. I do not want this here. Thank you. So the reason I share all of that is because with the vagus nerve and the way that works, you can come at this from multiple angles. If you have autoimmune boundary problems, meaning your intestines, your skin, those are usually kind of the two big ones. Specifically digestive problems, and you recognize that you also have these mental aspects of these problems, so maybe also anger problems with your anger or depression, borderline personality disorder. If you have anything that resembles this sort of like there's like this the notion of boundaries is blurred, you can come at it from different sides. You can help your mental health state by going at it from the physical realm, getting the right supplements to help heal the lining of your intestines. The one I'm taking now is I think it's called ION. I'm testing it out. I'm not yet recommending it. I'm just testing it to see how it works. The other thing that I take is L-glutamine, powdered form. That literally helps with to recover the lining of your intestines. You can look it all up. It's not suggestions. I'm not a doctor. I'm not prescribing anything to you. Please do your own research. But that's what I'm taking. So heal your gut lining and then like resurface it with all the good bacteria and feed that good bacteria. So heal that, or at least start moving towards healing that, and you will start to see the reality around you start to change, and your emotions are starting to maybe arise. Maybe you are actually experiencing more anger. That's a good sign, because as you're starting to seal that up, things are starting to respond to that. And you can come at it from the opposite direction. You can work on the emotions of anger and learning to contain those and process those painful experiences that in the first place made you suppress that anger. And doing all of that internal, emotional, subconscious work, which will then translate into feeling better physically. So that's kind of where I guess I want to end this long story. This is, again, don't treat me like an expert or take anything as advice. This is me literally like blurting out my story, like, in a very condensed format of my whole life into this concept of kind of bridging the gap between the body and the mind when it comes to boundary rupture and anger, and how it manifests itself in these physical conditions and autoimmune conditions. Because one last thing I will say, if you are someone who has either a physical or mental health disorder, adapt this thinking, the reason why I do this, that you are not broken. You don't have a disease or a disorder. Your body knows what it's doing. And the only actual problem here is that you can't communicate with your body yet properly, or you haven't learned how to do it, or you were taught not to communicate with your body. And it's all a skill that you can learn. And instead of referring to it as a disease, a condition, a disorder, anything like that, if you need to refer to it as an adaptation. My body has adapted in this particular way to serve me, to protect me, because I didn't know how to protect me. And through the work of unraveling all of that and helping yourself heal, what's really happening is you take responsibility off of your body and you say, you don't need to do this anymore. You don't need to create this pain anymore. You don't need to continuously reinforce this condition, because now I can take care of myself. If my boundaries get intruded on, I will stand my ground, and you learn how to do that. It's not going to be a day's work. I promise you that much. If you take anything from this video, take that if you want to embark on this journey and you don't want to be stuck in that state of like, I can't do anything about this, the state of powerlessness. Powerlessness is the reverse side of the same coin. On the other side of it is anger. This side is powerlessness. So if you're in a powerless state where you feel like you're stuck in this condition, whether it's mental or physical, the first step is to understand that you can get out of it. It's not going to take a day or even 2 or 3 or a month, maybe not even a year. But if you start doing work today and you're consistent, small steps every day, in a year, you'll be like, whoa, my life looks so different. I'm by no means at the end of the journey, but the overall, when you compare yourself to a year ago and now, your life will be like 180. This is my story. I think everyone has their unique story, and mine wasn't easy. But the thing that helped me a lot to go through a lot of the stuff that I have gone through has been this thought of, if I get out of this, I can then go and tell other people how I got out of it, and maybe it will help someone else get out of that. I don't know why, maybe because I'm a manifesting generator. I have no idea. I don't really know anything about human design, but that's the only thing I've learned from it, that I'm a manifesting generator, which means that I try things on myself to then tell other people whether it works or not. So, yeah, if you have resonated with this story, if it's helped you, let me know. Feedback will be really appreciated. Take what you resonated with, leave what you didn't resonate with. Again, reinforcing, this is my story. I'm not telling anyone what to do. I'm not telling anyone what to believe. I am simply sharing what I have gone through and the insights I have gained from the absolute years of doing all of this kind of work and unraveling these patterns for myself. So yeah, if it helps even a couple of people, like, that will be amazing. So let me know if it did. Follow this channel if you resonated with this. I post a lot of different content. This is the first time really I've posted something about this. Usually I love to talk about relationships. I love to talk about trauma as a whole, and sometimes offer certain tools and practices. And I love all things spirituality, growth, kind of personal growth, and intertwining all of that with somatic work, and always coming from the perspective of the body first and foremost, because that's primary in my world. That's primary. So if that sounds good, then do subscribe, like this video, and I will see you in the next one.